This was no accident. This was highly, highly thought out. And I don't mean the action itself, but Charlie, taking out Charlie. In order for them to dominate and win the United States and thereby, have a weapon against the rest of the world again, still, they have to take the only real asset and high ground, and that's our young men. Because there are no other assets. Nothing has any value without young men who are willing to stand and fight for it. Period. The land doesn't have value with the assets of the land, no banks, no built up, all this stuff, down underneath is dependent on young men, and men our age still, right? Who have to lead. But it's dependent on men who are tied to the land, tied to the people, tied to the assets and civilization, society, who will stand and fight for it. Without that, nothing has any value.
Can you talk a little bit about some of how you interpret what attacks have taken place against them over the last 20 years? And then, kind of lead into how Charlie Kirk and taking him out is so pivotal as a result of what has emerged from his influence.
There's a cycle. There's a pattern, right? And we're watching this pattern play out in Ukraine right now at the death of almost 2 million Ukrainian young men in 3 years, as opposed to about 140, 150,000 Russians, which is still a serious number, larger than all the deaths, American deaths since World War II. Mm-hmm. So not inconsiderable. What do? They demoralize the young men. They impoverish the young men. And this started, I'm 58 years old now. This messaging was already happening in school, toxic masculinity and men were abusers, and all of this stuff was happening in school when I was young, white guilt and male guilt, and all that is already started in the early 70s when I started school. You demoralize the men. You impoverish and demoralize the men. And what does that do? It separates them from loyalty and connection to the land and the peoples of the land and the culture, right, of the peoples of the land. It ensures that they have nothing to live for, nothing to fight for. And then you feed this, what we call Marxist now over the last century and a half, but this isn't a much older, you go after morals and value and honor and duty and beauty and all the things that, motivate young men to build something, be something, to develop themselves. And you attack them all the time. And you find ways to socioeconomically and culturally promote ugliness and insanity and people who don't earn a damn thing but somehow become wealthy. And it's all done on purpose, but at some point, your intent is to, over that time, convert enough of them to come over to your side and just burn it all down. At some point, that's not because most young men do have thousands, hundreds of thousands, not millions of years of genetic programming in them to defend, to protect their own. And so at some point, that's going to overcome the recruiting to your malevolent side. And so, at some point you're going to have to radicalize them with disgust and purity so that they will go out and burn the world to the ground and die in great numbers. This is what happened to the Germans. We did not defeat the Nazis, the National Socialists. We defeated the Germans at the cost of 5 to 7 million of their men, right? So it's the same thing again happening in Ukraine right now. Ukraine is being wiped out because all the men are being killed in this purity, this disgust and purity fight against the Russians. Never mind, it's a civil war because they're the same peoples, right? So the reason they had to kill Charlie Kirk is because they're getting ready, and James Lindsay's talking about this, and I brought it to his attention 5 years ago, actually. Where they have to go now is they've gone as far as they can possibly go with the Marxist degenerate, insanity stuff. And now they're ready to flip the switch to disgust and purity to radicalize our young men, get them ethno-nationalist. It won't start that way first. It'll go after the trans, right, et cetera, and then it'll get ethno-nationalist if it goes that way. Well, the reason they had to kill Charlie Kirk is because Charlie Kirk, no matter what they threw at him, was calm, logical, rational, and called for moderation in thought, in emotion, in action, et cetera. They had to kill the moderate before they radicalize. And they had to do it publicly. That's one side of it. The second piece of it is that you know this from our other world, right? It's called confidence targets, right? And so they had to give the radicals, the Marxists, the degenerates, the ones that they want. So what are they going to do now? They're going to switch young men, all these demoralized and impoverished young men, wrathful young men, incel forced, young men, and they're going to drive them into disgust and purity to go kill the trans, the LGBTs, the violent, so they're going to drive them into this place where they do what? They take out the foot soldiers that have been used over the last 40 years.
That's right.
What you do in a late stage insurgency. You take out your foot soldiers because you don't want them around to continue to be an insurgency against you because they are actually technically insane. Right? The ideologies didn't create the insanity. They were attracted to the ideology that matches their insanity.
Wow.
Right? So that's why they had to take out Charlie Kirk, is because the movement, and you can see it. We can see Nazi stuff, literal Nazi stuff popping up. We're seeing the white pride stuff pop up. There's not all of it's wrong. Some of it's right stuff. Maybe not so much the Nazi stuff, but, loving your own people, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But you're watching probably $10 billion a month being put into this subtle information campaign. It's what the rape bans are about. It's what the crime, the releasing the criminals is all about. It's about getting the young men into a place where they can trigger disgust. And trans is the primary one. We have deep wiring against trans. It's deeply, deeply wired into us, to defend our tribe, our community against the threat, that kind of insanity threat, violent threat. They're now ready to flip the switch. And they had to get rid of Charlie Kirk. And they had to give the courage and confidence to the trans and the criminals and the BLMs and everybody else that, you're protected, you're good. It's weapons free.